Under Plum Lake by Lionel Davidson. Part 2, Under the Sea. 11, The Fabulous City. I remember another road, and doing 300 miles an hour on it, and he must have told me how transport worked by then, because I wasn't surprised when we flew. It worked by magnetism. It used the Earth as a magnet which could attract or repel like any other magnet. According to the controls, you could go forward or backward or up and down, and according to the power, you could increase or decrease speed. We came to traffic, and he muttered and slowed. He said there was a speed limit, and not because of the danger of crashes, because vehicles couldn't crash. When you switched on, you also switched on your force line, which meant that cars repelled each other and couldn't touch however fast they were going, but they repelled each other so violently at speed that equipment and people could be damaged. And you had to be careful about spare parts. The spare parts weren't only for machines, but I'll come to that. There's no pain in Egon. We had to slow so much that he looked anxiously at the sky, and I saw the sun was setting. Clouds had appeared and the countryside was turning mauve. I'll have to turn off, he said, and began muttering again. And after a few minutes we did turn off, up a country lane. We went a few miles, and he stopped and switched on a panel on the dashboard. It lit up a bluish color with little points of light moving in every direction on it. Then he pressed something else and we took off. We took off vertically. The ground seemed to telescope below, and I could see the motorway and on all sides rolling countryside. Then he stopped, and we hovered while he studied the panel. I'm not supposed to do it, he said, and muttered a bit, and began flying forward very fast. We did it for just a few minutes. Dido studying the panel all the time. Then he said, "Now, right ahead." And I looked and saw something like hundreds and thousands on a cake. It was a mass of little dots of color. "I can't go closer," he said, and stopped, and we stayed still in the air. He moved a control on the dashboard, and, as before, the glass on the windscreen became a lens, and the little dots moved forward. In short, sharp movements, the dots turned into shapes, into cubes, spirals, octagons, needles, all marvelously colored and sparkling so brilliantly in the last of the light that I gasped out loud. I didn't know where to look first. The shapes moved closer and closer. The whole screen filled up with them. They were buildings, I could see now, and the teeming mass of them was a city. But it was like a carnival. Some of the buildings were like twists of striped candy. Others like flowers or mushrooms. One had a pear-shaped dome the color of a pearl. He heard me exclaiming and laughed himself. "You have to see it in the light," he said. "It will be dark when we get there." "It's beautiful," I gasped. "The most beautiful," he said. "It's the finest city on the earth. The finest that there's ever been. I'll show you the center, the old part." He touched a control, and the city began to rush past. Rushing past in a great blaze of color, the fantastic buildings whirling away on every side. Then he slowed, and several beautiful plazas came into view. Broad avenues radiated into the most spacious of the plazas. There were fountains spaced out over it, and in the center was a tree. It was the strangest tree. It was huge, a luminous purple, and its upper branches were in constant motion. There was water all round it. Fish were in the water. They were going in a steady procession round the tree, and I caught the flash of tails in the last sunlight. "What is it?" I said. "The president's palace." "The tree is." "It's the symbol of Egon. It's the image of a sea anemone. A sea anemone is an animal, but it acts like a plant. It can move if it wants to, but it doesn't. It stays in one place and gets everything it needs with its tentacles. It's the sign that we'll never try a move again. Well, you've seen it. And we better go," he said urgently. "We've been spotted." Among the little lights on the panel, one had begun to flash red and was growing bigger. He touched the controls and we dropped sharply. The moon came out, and the stars. I watched them. Moon and stars under the sea? He wouldn't answer my questions. He just concentrated on his driving. There were several lanes of traffic now. Lighted restaurants passed, floating in the air. People danced in them, in the air. I watched them bobbing over the countryside. But now I could see the glow of Egonia, a vast city of purple and gold in the sky. I couldn't take my eyes off it, yet when we came to the city, I couldn't all at once understand it. There was no ordinary light, but everything glowed. The roads glowed from within, a pale golden color. The buildings glowed in every color. We passed one of the multicolored spirals I'd seen in the sunset. Its twisting candy stripes of green and pink and white were glowing the same colors, though more softly and sparkling all the way up with pinpoints of light that were evidently windows. On every side the fabulous structures passed, and we crossed an intersection. I could see along the broad thoroughfares, hundreds more of them. The pavements were thronged with people, the night air full of the buzz of conversation and the laughter of music and laughter and music. Shops and stores of all kinds were open, and people were seated at outdoor cafes. As before, it looked like a huge carnival, but now that I was in it, even better. There was an air of such excitement and gaiety everywhere that I found myself laughing out loud, and it didn't seem strange, because most other people were too. When I looked at Dido, he was grinning away himself. "What do you think of it?" he said. "It's the most fantastic town I ever saw." "It's the most fantastic anyone ever saw. It has the best of all towns in it. You can do anything with a town. It doesn't have to be just streets and big buildings," he said. "If a building gets boring, you put another one up. Most of these have only been up a few hundred years." Just then we passed one like a pineapple, an elongated pineapple, and I could see people sitting out on the glowing segments. We were going slowly now in traffic, and he was careless with his driving. Sometimes he didn't slow in time when the car in front slowed, and I felt the rebound as the force line stopped us from touching, and the car behind rebounded from us. And there's so much I've no time to put. I haven't mentioned the rainbows where the cars from the intersections passed over, or how the giants everywhere so soon became normal to me. We just drove on. We drove a long time through the fabulous city before I began to recognize, again, the areas I'd seen from the air. I saw the series of beautiful plazas begin, and the broad ceremonial avenues, and then the broadest avenue of all, with the sea anemone palace at the end. There was a huge glow of purple in the sky, and I could see the town going on beyond it. "Are we going to the other side of the town?" I said. "We're going into the town," he said, "the center." And just then we swung round a huge square and came to golden gates. Uniformed giants at each side saluted and opened the gates. We drove through. I looked at Dido, but he didn't look back. Fountains were playing all over the plaza, but the splashing sound didn't come from them. It came from the immense moat all round the palace. Spouts of water and spray were flung high as the procession office cruised steadily round. And I saw, with incredulity, that they were whales. We took a rainbow over the whales and headed for the palace, and I said, "Dido." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry, I should have told you. My father's president of Egon. He runs the world. Welcome to the palace." And that's the end of the 11th section.